A blessed day to one and all. We praise God because of this opportunity that we have come together as we do our best to come up with an action research using the method which we call the lesson study. And at this point, I like to express my gratitude to SDO Quirino for this opportunity to revisit the process that I introduced before on how to migrate the action research, or I'd rather say the lesson study experience, into an action research. Because when we do this, our learners will surely benefit from this, because teachers will be analyzing how they did the lesson study in their respective classes. So at this point, please allow me to share my presentation. And here it is. Of course, it's my favorite first slide, and that is the panagdadapon. So to our schools division superintendent, Ma'am Flor Ecobe, and everyone, our ASDS, our education program supervisors, our non-teaching staff, our school heads, teachers, parents, and most importantly, our learners who will derive benefit from this endeavor of converting the lesson study into an action research. I remember this picture pretty well before the pandemic, and it simply amazes me every time that I reflect on the message of this kind of formation. It's the coming together, because we like to improve as individuals, we like to improve as a community, we like to improve as communities united in action. So I entitled this presentation as Making the Lesson Study an Action Research, a Strategy on Mercy for the Love. Alam niyo naman sa akin, mahilig ako sa mga ganito. And mercy is monitoring, evaluation, research, and continual improvement. That's mercy. But mercy as a word is in fact a French word, which means thank you. And then love is learning outcomes with values education. So learning outcomes with values education. So simply put, we are making the lesson study an action research because we pretty believe that when we do this, we are introducing a learning strategy that allows us to reflect on what we teach. We reflect on how students learn a particular concept, because in reflecting how we do things, we also come to realize that there are many ways by which we can improve how learners learn. And we do that out of love. We do that because we value learning outcomes and values education. So this is also in support to the usual. This is a barbecue leadership research initiative which we did at SDO Quirino. So this is my presentation outline. There are three parts. The first part is we revisit the lesson study cycle. I also put there e-lesson study cycle because in the new normal, I'm sure that there have been many initiatives, okay, to navigate how else we can implement the lesson study. Second part would be revisitation of what action research is and anchor it to Debit Order 16 series of 2017. And then we'll walk you through again on the basic parts of an action research, but this time we are attaching the lesson study as the main focus, okay, in doing this action research. Okay, then we'll do some review. Pasadahan lang natin ang barbecue leadership inspired mercy for the love. Then the last part would be the full-blown LS-based action research. So if it were chapter-based, there are 5 chapters. Okay, and then the chapter 1 is the context and rationale. Chapter 2, this is some form of review of related literature. So I'm introducing here transactional distance theory. And then chapter 3 will be the action research methods. And then chapter 4, the discussion of results and reflection, plus some interpretation guide or reflection guide. In chapter 5, we have the action plan. Okay, so are you ready? Okay, so thumbs up naman dyan or type yes if you are ready, okay. Or type 1 if you are ready. But I'm sure you are ready. But a little request, syempre, if you like to really appreciate how we do the conversion from the LS to action research, medyo we'll spend some time listening and taking down notes, or probably from here you can already use your laptop and type as much as you want as you develop already your action research based on lesson study. So lesson study amid the pandemic, you see in 21st century learning, and there are what we call 4 arrows here pointing to the right. Okay. Firstly is on 21st century learning. So there are many concepts, but these concepts are in the various tasks or experiences that students have at home, in school, in community. That's why we call this the rich real world tasks. And as students mature, we say that they develop in terms of their ability to think. And our effort here is towards higher order thinking. And of course, to let everyone realize that there's a need to do some collaboration here. So students need to collaborate, students and teachers need to interact, student and student need to interact. Okay, and that's the essence of 21st century learning. But of course, students come to our classes with their own perceptions of realities. So, and we need to discover these concepts, how our students perceive realities, perceive events, perceive concepts. That's why as teachers, we need to know, we need to listen to what our students are talking. We need to observe what they are doing. Okay? And we will be able to discover the transparent schema of our learners. Then, when you allow students, okay, to do self-assessment, when you allow other students to assess their classmates, aside from us teachers doing assessing, okay, learning in reference to what students do, then we'll be navigating the multidimensionality of assessment. So self-assessment, peer assessment, I think most of the time that is what we lack, because we believe that only teachers can do the assessing. We'll see, okay, from this experience. Plus, of course, a timely, appropriate feedback or reflection. So, napakahalaga na magbigay tayo ng feedback sa mga bata. Napakahalaga ng bata magbigay siya ng feedback sa kanyang sarili. And that is reflection. It's connected with metacognition as well. Okay, thinking about learning, thinking how I behave, thinking how I perform. So, and that is reflection. So in considering that, we'll promoting what we call the 21st century assessment. And how do this relate with what we are doing? Of course, in 21st century learning, sana ganito. Okay. So students having gardens at home, students having some sort of livelihood at home. So pwedeng gulayan sa bakuran, gulayan sa paraangan, or a fish pond, okay, a backyard fish pond, something like that. And well, learners have their self-learning modules. Okay, and we have to let this interact by thinking of ways by which the self-learning modules or even learning activity sheets will be interacting with the natural environment of our learners. Kasi kung minsan, ang mundo ng bata, parang naka-confine siya sa self-learning module. Alam naman nating lahat, the self-learning module is black and white, text, kung may mga images man, hindi naman masyadong nakikita. And therefore, there's a need for us, okay, to interact the self-learning modules with the natural events that are occurring, okay, around the learner, para lalong maging maganda ang pagkatuto, para yan ang essence of 21st century learning. And then that will be the essence of the 21st century assessment. Okay, so from here, we'll be having written works, performance, tasks. Sa lesson study, alam ko, umiikot naman dito. Diba? So, this is now the e-lesson study cycle. And there are, how do you call that? Let's say 2 layers. Okay, we have the first cycle of the lesson study. We have Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. Of course, I need not explain this with details, but maybe just a sound recall of what lesson study is. Goal setting. So teachers come together and make plan. They set the goal. What do they like to study together? Then Roman numeral 2 is planning of the research lesson. So it can include, of course, drafting the research lesson and try it out, then revise. And that's the one that will be used for the first implementation, Roman numeral 3. Okay, so in the lesson implementation, the focus here, of course, are our learners. So we observe what they do, we record what they do. And as a teacher, I must be conscious of the plan while observing students interacting together. How teacher interacts, how student interacts with a teacher, and how everyone is interacting with the materials that are on hand. And in the Roman numeral 4, the post-lesson reflection and discussion. Okay, so you need to have the knowledgeable others give feedback, interact, and then as your basis in improving the the research lesson. And for the second implementation. So for the second implementation, we have two parts. Okay, so implementation of the research lesson. So you do again, but this time in a different class. And then Roman numeral 2 is the post-lesson reflection. Again, the knowledgeable others are there. So in Roman numeral 1, again, focus on what learners do, focus on how they interact, focus on what concepts they are revealing, what concepts they're talking about, what are their generalizations. So essentially, lesson study is learner-centered. Okay? So just veer away from the concept that it is the teacher, okay, who is there just dispensing information. No, of course, that's not the reason why you do the lesson study. The reason why you do lesson study is to focus on what the students are doing, to focus on what they are sharing, okay? And you allow them. You allow them to express themselves. Okay, so that's it. We can also look at the cycle in this way. So, like here we have 8 phases in relation to the previous slide. Of course, the lesson study cycle. So from here, look at the this part. Okay, where you can see the first lesson implementation, the second lesson implementation. So there are 8 phases. So the logistics, first phase. The second phase is the student development goal. So what do we like? What do we like them to manifest, to show? Okay. Then phase 3 is doing an observation for the first implementation. Then we modify. Then we reteach. Then we do analyze. Then we revise, and then share the findings. Okay. So, di ba? Parang gumagawa ka din lang talaga ng research kapag nagtuturo ka ng lesson na nagamit ang lesson study. But remember na ang lesson study, nakafocus lang siya, kumbaga, sa iisang lesson plan. At dahil isang lesson plan, only a specific learning competency, a specific concept. Kaya bantayan yung pag-evolve ng concept, bantayan kung paano na-develop yung concept, bantayan kung paano in-acquire ng mga bata yung mga concept na yun. Kung ano ang mga ginawa nila para ma-develop nila yung tamang pagkaunawa sa kung ano man yung paksa na gusto natin na maintindihan ng mga bata. Okay? So at this point, let's now connect everything to action research. So if we like to convert the lesson study experience to something like an action research, then be guided with plan, do, study, act. So it's the PDSA or the PDCA. Okay? So this is also a cycle in doing action research. So if there's a cycle in the LS, there's also a cycle in the action research. So we'll see how they can converge. So when we say plan, syempre, pag gagawa ka pa lang ng proposal, so you have to follow the RMG format in making your action research proposal. So nandito yung parang reference natin kung paano gumawa ng action research proposal. Because essentially, you will be doing the same thing. Okay? Then you do, in fact, nagawa nyo na. Kasi lesson study, tapos na. So all you need to do is just pull everything together. Then the essence of this conversion from lesson study to action research is to study what happened. So there are important details that you need to bring in, okay, in your action research in reference to what you did what students did, okay, in that particular day where you taught them using the lesson study. Okay, and then of course you analyze, you conclude, you reflect, and make action. Essentially, ang isang lalabas din dito ay what will be the last version of your research lesson. That is just one output. But we are doing that because we like to improve further how students develop the concepts. Okay. So, and the completed action research will have these parts. It's the same thing as you have been using. Okay. Talagang mag-focus lang tayo talaga kung paano mag-converge ang lesson study cycle and action research cycle. So, I did some modification in presenting the completed action research using the lesson study. Okay. So, you may want to adapt this. So there's a title page, abstract, acknowledgement, and the table of contents. Then there are 5 chapters. The first chapter is the context and rationale. So the lesson study as the innovation, intervention, and strategy. Then we have the LS-based action research framework, the LS-based action research questions. And then chapter 2, let me just introduce to you an important theory in learning amid the COVID situation. We call this understanding effective distance learning delivery using transactional distance theory. Okay. Then chapter 3, the action research methods, who are the participants, the sources of data, and the data gathering process. Then of course, data analysis. Chapter 4 is a discussion of results and reflection. Then chapter 5 will be the action plan. There will be references, appendices, and if you wish, you also have your financial report. Okay, so here is a sample LS-based action research title: the effect of lesson study on the learner's understanding of during the what quarter of school year 2021-2022. To make it clearly, it can be the effect of lesson study on the learner's understanding of sound waves during the first quarter of school year 2021-2022. That's for science. And then in math, effect of lesson study on the learner's understanding of mixed fractions during the first quarter of school year 2021-2022. But of course, if you did the lesson study in other learning areas, then change them accordingly. Okay? Later on, you will also be writing your abstract. So we address this once the full-blown action research is completed. So please focus in your write-up. Yes, we'll be having the acknowledgement part of the action research paper. You're going to write this at your most convenient time. So you just express your gratitude to those people or institution who provided assistance in the completion of your full-blown action research. Okay, so having shared those parts, we're now ready to tackle the chapter 1. And this is context and rationale. So chapter 1 or context and rationale has 3 major parts: the innovation, intervention, and strategy. Then we have the research framework and the action research questions. In the research management guidelines, wala siyang binabanggit na research framework, but you see, napakahalaga kapag alam mo ding gawan ng research framework ang iyong action research. So let's have some details. In the chapter 1 or context and rationale, write a paragraph that discusses the effects of COVID, that discusses supposedly the effects of COVID-19 pandemic on learning. So here apply your writing skills. Kahit 1, 2, o 3 paragraphs lang, sapat na. And you're going to end the paragraph with something like this. So for this reason, the lesson study was used to improve how students learn. So that's your catch statement for this part of your action research paper. Now, dun naman sa innovation, intervention, and strategy, then you just write in your paragraph, okay? A definition of intervention. You can use this: any process, material, equipment, device which the teacher has thoroughly thought or made or adapted or borrowed as a better way to handle a classroom problem or improve a classroom situation or condition that will benefit a learner, a group of learners, or all learners. Help the teacher understand his or her teaching ways and practices, and needs to establish effects on knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values. So for me, very appropriate yung definition na ito on intervention in relation to lesson study. That's why lesson study here is the intervention. So again, at this point, because you are now writing your chapter 1, so you may want to just put here the image of the lesson study cycle and then write a paragraph, okay, for a paragraph or two, and discuss how you use the lesson study. So the figure below may be added in the manuscript if it was exactly the same as you did, okay, or modify it accordingly. Okay. And then we go back, of course, to the title. So the title has an important relationship with the framework. And this is my suggested framework for your lesson study. Okay, you may have a common framework for all. If you like to modify it, then please feel free to do so. But here you see 3 boxes. Okay, the first box, the middle box, and the third box. The first box is on the independent variables. The second box on the dependent variables, and then the third box would be some sort of an output. Okay, yeah, pwede ding first box input, second box process, and then last box is the output. But let's take a look at the independent variables. So in independent variables, you have to put there the grade level, the same grade level, and 2 or 3 or more sections. Kailangan lang yung homogeneity din. Okay? Homogeneity of the classes. Okay? But, well, we understand that this could be a challenge. Okay? But nevertheless, you need to have 2 classes to observe. Okay, and the major intervention is the lesson study. So the first implementation and the second implementation. Now, what are you going to gather? So let's take a look at the dependent variables. So you need to have the written test scores. Okay, not the entire quarter, but just on that particular lesson. Okay, kung ano lang yung ipagawa sa mga bata. Siyempre, kung meron kang writing activity doon na pwedeng scorean, kung individual, then okay. Kung group score, group performance, then focus on that. So pag sinabi ko dito written test or performance task, pwedeng nangyari yung dalawa, pwedeng isa lang. So bear that in mind. Kasi baka mamaya, ilalagay ninyo yung mga data ninyo ng first quarter. No. What we mean here is yung written test performance and or performance task. Kung alin doon ang available during that particular lesson implementation. Kasi siyempre may pinagawa ka. Kung may pinagawa ka, may ginawa yung bata. Kung pwede mong scorean, then determine the score. Kung pinagawa mo individually, then there's an individual score. Pag pinagawa mo yan by group, then there is a group score, right? So that's the essence of written test and performance tasks in this framework. For that particular lesson only, on sound waves or on mixed fractions, right? But equally interesting to determine would be the students' responses, the interaction, the concepts. Kailangan binabantayan doon. Kung paano na-develop yung mga concepts. Okay, so pwedeng may pinagawa ka, can be experiment, okay, or any aspect where students produce or perform. Okay, so sample lang yung experiments. Okay, can be any activity for that matter. Okay, kasi doon makikita mo doon kung ano yung mga possible na difficulties and challenges ng mga bata. Okay? And the action would be the improved lesson plan. So remember, meron kang draft lesson, research lesson, meron kang first implementation, then revise, second implementation, then revise. And that final revision, ito yung sinasabi dito sa third box, yung action, improved lesson plan. Okay? So, having shared this, pwede na nating i-derive yung mga research questions. Okay. Alam nyo ba na ang kagandahan kapag may framework ay madaling gawin ang mga research questions. Madaling i-craft yung mga research questions. But before we do the crafting of these research questions, so pasadahan na lang ulit natin ito. Okay. Because they also provide important foundation, okay, in doing the lesson study. So I have shared what mercy is, what love is, and I connected that with barbecue leadership. So I love sharing this, and I'm sure that many of you know this, okay? And this is the meaning also of barbecue, being and becoming through quality leadership, being and becoming through quality learning, okay? As we continue to advocate a learner-centered kind of education. Okay? And in the barbecue leadership, we have 4 key result areas: KRA1, leadership and governance; KRA2, curriculum and learning; KRA3, accountability and continuous improvement; and KRA4, management of resources. So in this lesson study being converted to action research, okay, nakafocus tayo sa KRA2, okay, curriculum and learning. And at the same time, we are addressing KRA3, yung accountability and continuous improvement. Okay? So, and then focusing on KRA2, curriculum and learning, ayan, may bago akong kinoin dito, model. Modular and online distance education or learning. So it is SLM based. Okay? This is CIA for all, curriculum, instruction, assessment. And that's the roof of this K-12 home. All is the advanced, the least, the lost, and the last. And these are the learners who climbed the ladder of education from kinder, grade 1, until grade 12. And after grade 12, they open the door. And there are many opportunities. Kolehiyo, trabaho, negosyo. Therefore, as teachers, okay, we help our learners climb the ladder of education by providing structures. And in our daily teaching, we adapt. We also use the lesson study. Siyempre, hindi naman lesson study araw-araw, di ba? Okay. So, but what we are saying here is the lesson study is known for its effectiveness. Okay. Siyempre, nandito yung most essential learning competencies. Okay. And there are self-learning modules because we do this as we promote quality education. Kaya nga, sulong edukalidad. Okay. So, well, you know all of this. Okay. These are the self-learning module parts, and these are the learning activity sheet parts. So perhaps in your lesson study, you considered the self-learning module and the learning activity sheets. Kasi dito, pwede ka mag-derive ng mga scores. And syempre, alam nyo na ito, and we admire your efforts, your creativity in the printing, sorting, distribution, and retrieval of self-learning modules and learning activity sheets. And let us not also forget that there are household or home learning types. Okay, we have the multigrade, isang bahay, isang tahanan. Okay, may 3, 4, 5 na nag-aaral together. Okay, so pwedeng 5 mga bata nag-aaral together, isang kinder, isang grade 3, isang grade 7, isang grade 9, saka isang grade 11. So just imagine. So lesson study ninyo, how did you do that for this kind of household? And the multi-grade household can also be rich and poor. Siguro kung rich, kayang-kaya pa. Pero pag poor, I think doon ang buhos ng pagtulong. Okay? So there are also households na nag-iisang anak na nag-aaral. So we call that the monograde. So can be rich, can be, and I'm trying to highlight those kasi you see, sana pag nagtuturo tayo, we always consider that equity in the learning process. Equity, promoting equity in lesson study. I hope we teach because we like to address the individual potential of learners. Sabi nga, one size fits all does not work. Okay, sabi ko na yan. So I need not elaborate on this, the typology of households. Ang sinasabi ko lang dito is merong 4 na klase ng household. Yung multigrade na mayaman versus mahirap, yung monograde na mayaman versus mahirap. Siyempre, sa kahirapan ng buhay at pandemya pa, lalong nadidiin ang ating mga learners na nasa mga mahihirap na sitwasyon. Kaya pangunawa din ang deserve nila, di ba? Okay? So, medyo parang advertisement lang yon, but to again remind us that in the teaching and learning process, those are the foundation of why we are in the field of basic education. And therefore, going back to this sample title, like Effect of Lesson Study on the Learner's Understanding of Sound Waves during the first quarter of the school year 2021-2022. So that's the title. Okay. Now, I discussed this a while ago. Okay. And this time, ano yung research questions natin? So kung mapansinin ninyo dito ngayon, okay, yung 3 boxes, first box, middle box, and then third box. In the first box, we can introduce here 2 research questions. First, how the teachers organize themselves for the lesson study. So that's the first question. The second research question will be how the initial lesson study draft was developed. So yung research lesson, paano na-develop? So importante din yan. So these 2 are the research questions that may be considered, okay, under the first box. Sa second box, yun, medyo marami. So we have research question 3, research question 4, research question 5, research question 6, and research question 7. Don't be overwhelmed with the number of research questions. Ginawa ko lang yan para lalong mas maintindihan. Okay? So research question 3 is, how did the students perform and interact during the first lesson implementation? So what concepts were they weak at or strong at? Kailangan masagot natin yon. So sa research question 4 naman, what changes were made in the lesson study parts after the first lesson implementation? So napakahalagang tanong yan. Sa research question 5, how did the students perform and interact during the second lesson implementation? So what concept were they weak or strong at? So parang naulit lang yung RQ3, yung research question 3, it's just that second lesson ang pinag-usapan natin dito. Sa research question 6, how did the first and second lesson implementation compare in terms of the students' performance and interaction? So what concepts were they weak or strong at? And we mean here yung persistent na concepts na nailabas ng mga bata. Okay. So that's comparing the first and second lesson implementation. Then somewhere down below, the research question 7, what did the teachers realize? Okay, so may mga realizations kasi ang mga teachers natin after the lesson, after the first lesson, the second lesson, dahil nga may mga knowledgeable others tayo, okay, where they listened to, they interacted with. Then lastly, sa third box, the research question 8 would be, what changes were made after the second lesson implementation? So you see, so dito pinapakita ko din kung paano gumawa ng research question based on the framework. Kasi ang paggawa ng research question, hindi lang naman by random writing of a research question. We have to make it very logical as well. Okay? So, we are now ready to just harvest the research questions, then put that in the write-up of your action research, and it will now look like this. So, amid the COVID-19, this action research examined the Math 9 performance of 9 matulungin and 9 matapat for the first quarter of school year 2021-2022 on the topic mixed fractions, using the SLM-based home learning as a distance learning delivery modality using lesson study. Ganyan na. So, pwede nyo na i-copy-paste yan. In fact, ito presentation ko na ito, convert nyo lang yan sa Word file and then organize ng konti. Yun na. That's now the lesson study converted to action research. Okay? Kaya talagang ginawa ko yung presentation na ito so that after this, okay, I can share the PowerPoint and then let your technical people convert this to a Word file. And then meron na kayong common template, okay, for your lesson study action research. Okay? So specifically, it's answered the following questions. So remember how we derived this. Number 1, how did the teachers organize themselves? Number 2, what are the parts and content of the study lesson before the first implementation? Then, in relation to the first lesson implementation, letter A, what scores, written works, and performance tasks were obtained by the students through the activities they performed. Letter B, what evidence or conversation sample can be shown regarding student-to-student interaction, student-teacher interaction, student-to-materials interaction. Letter C, what concepts are easy and difficult. Okay. Note that all of this can be readily answered, right? Because the researchers here are the same teachers who implemented the lesson study. And therefore, lahat ng mga questions na nailagay ko dito are answerable. Kayang-kayang lagyan ng kasagutan. And the best person or persons who can answer them would be the teachers who implemented the lesson study. Okay? So let's move on. This is now question number 4. So what changes were made in the parts and content of the study lesson before the second implementation? Number 5, in relation to the second lesson implementation, A, what scores were obtained by the students? Letter B, what evidence or conversation sample can be shown regarding student-to-student interaction? So I hope na you got what I mean by these kinds of interaction. Kasi sa classroom naman, di ba? Kailangan mag-create tayo ng opportunities na nag-uusap ang mga estudyante. Right? Kailangan nakikita natin kung paano nag-i-interact si student sa si teacher. Pwedeng si student ang nag-initiate na kausapin si teacher. Pwedeng ang teacher ang nag-initiate na kausapin si student. Okay? So that's what we mean here by interaction. Siyempre, pag student and material interaction, di ba? For example, merong mga activity, there are materials, then the students will be doing the activity. That's the kind of interaction. Right? Then see what concepts are easy and difficult among our students. And number 6 is just comparing the first lesson implementation and the second lesson implementation. And number 7, what are the realizations of the teachers? So dito papasok yung mga karanasan nila sa paggawa, sa pag-implement, and doon sa experience nila sa knowledgeable others. And number 8, what changes were made in the parts and content of the study lesson after the second implementation? So there are practically 8 questions, and for me, okay, if I were the implementer of the lesson study, first and second, kasi team naman ito, di ba? Teamwork, team effort naman ito. So, mandali lang sagutan ito. So, ito yung mga sasagutin natin dito sa ating action research. So, let's move on now to the chapter 2. So, this is understanding effective distance learning delivery modality, delivery using the transactional distance theory. So what is transactional distance theory? So, this can provide lesson study the much-needed boost in differentiating instruction amid health crises and emergencies in education. Okay. So this is transactional distance. So it is distinguished from physical or temporal distance, refers to the psychological or communicative space that separates teacher from learner in the transaction between them occurring in a structured or planned learning situation. This is by Moore of 1997. So take note here, the difference between low transactional distance and high transactional distance. Well, sa high transactional distance, hindi naman ibig sabihin na natutulog lang yung bata. Parang ano lang ito, parang one way of illustrating na kapag malayo yung parang transactional distance ng teacher sa estudyante, pag hindi sila masyado nakakapag-interact, parang nahihirapan yung bata. And that's the kind of situation na meron tayo ngayon dahil pandemya. So malayo yung mga bata, hindi sila masyado nakakapag-interact sa kanilang teacher, and therefore nakakaroon sila ng tinatawag na mga socio-emotional challenges. So this is the meaning of the high transactional distance. So kung malayo ang bata sa teacher, ibig sabihin walang masyadong nangyayari na pag-uusap, and therefore nahihirapan yung bata, kaya mataas ang transactional distance. Samantala ang bata, kung malapit sa teacher, madalas nag-uusap, okay, then we say na the teacher can give more time developing the knowledge, skills, and attitudes of the learner. So that's why yun ang low transactional distance. So I hope that you got the meaning of transactional distance here. It's not a physical distance, but it is a distance that separates the teacher and the learner. Okay, not in the confine of the classroom, but it can be in the confine of a very, how do you call that? Due to location, something like that. So, kasi for example, ako, nandito ako sa central office, tapos nandiyan kayo sa SDO Quirino, okay? There is a physical distance, pero dahil nagkaroon ako ng opportunity na maki-face-to-face sa inyo virtually, for me, this is still low transactional distance. Kasi nakakapag-usap tayo. Pero without the Zoom, without the Google Meet, okay, At ang meron lang kayo, okay, ay kunwari handout kung paano gumawa ng action research using the lesson study. Okay, bibigay ko lang sa inyo, yan, aralin ninyo, gagawin ninyo. Yun ay high transactional distance. Okay? At siyempre, sabi nga natin, minsan nakaka-stress, nakaka-promote ng anxiety, yung high transactional distance. Kasi kulang ng interaction ng pag-uusap ng bata at saka ng kanilang mga teacher. Kaya sana balik na tayo sa face-to-face kahit limited man lamang. So, pinaliwanag ko lang ng kahalagahan ng transactional distance. Okay? So, in transactional distance, there are 3 things to remember. Hindi ko kailangang elaborate sa isa, pero hapyawan ko lang. Pag sinabi nating structure, ito yung lesson study as a structure. Right? The lesson study as a structure. Kasi nandun ang curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Nandun ang learning resources. Okay? Pag dialogue, yung pag-uusap ng bata at saka sa teacher. Yung pag-uusap ng student at saka student. So, yan yung dialogue. Kaya, pantayan ninyo ang dialogue sa lesson study. Okay? So, kasi, how you do that? Navigate the many possible strategies to establish dialogue. Then autonomy naman, this is in relation to the learner. So pag sinabi nating learner's autonomy, may mga bata na natututo na nag-iisa, may mga bata na hindi kayang matuto na nag-iisa. Okay? So pag grades siguro 9, 10, 11, 12, ang autonomy mataas. Mas marami yung mga bata na kayang maging autonomous learners. Pero kapag kinder, grade 1, grade 2, nako, challenge po yun in terms of autonomy. Yun lang naman po. And then this one also shows the different programs by technology. So from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I don't know what you use in your lesson study. Is it number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 11? So mamili kayo dyan. Okay? So nasaan kayo dyan sa lesson study ninyo? Anong ginamit ninyo? So if you can pinpoint that, locate that, okay? Focus on that point, and look at the x-axis and the y-axis. Okay? So, pag naituro mo yun, for example, pag tinuro mo ay number 7. Yan. So, turo ko number 7, natinan mo yung x-axis, less dialogue. Okay, less dialogue. Siguro walang internet. Computer. Merong computer, walang internet. So, less dialogue pa rin yan. Okay? So, and then, tinan mo yung structure, medyo less structure. So, nandyan yung transactional distance. Okay. So, dahil computer-assisted yan, medyo okay pa. Di ba? Okay. So, paano na kung pupunta ka ng number 11, textbook? So, module. Ayan. So, less dialogue, more structure, higher transactional distance. More stressful. More anxious, more anxiety triggered. More triggered ang anxiety. Yan yung way of interpreting this kind of slide. Okay? So, I did this to show the many possibilities to further explain what I mean by the previous slide. So, sa first column, technologies, high-tech, low-tech, no-tech. Yan. Dialogue. Sa high technology, mataas ang dialogue. Sa no technology, mababa ang dialogue. Mababa or maybe wala. Autonomy, syempre, pag depende sa grade yan sabi ko na sa structure, I think lahat naman may structure kasi may self-learning module. So sa transactional distance, nakikita natin na higher ang technology, low transactional distance. Okay? No technology, higher ang transactional distance. Yun ang ibig sabihin. So, to understand further transactional distance, you do some research. I may not be able to explain it well, but kung naka-record ito, pwede niyong balik-balikan. Diba? Although, bibigay ko naman itong material ko na ito. Right? So, that's chapter 2. Okay. Let's move on to chapter 3 na. The action research methods, participants, sources of data, and data gathering and data analysis. So participants, so syempre you have your participants, your learners in the first lesson, your learners in the second lesson. That's it. Describe. Then sources of data and data gathering. So sources of data ninyo, the lesson study, the research lesson itself is a form of data. Okay, kasi may laman yun eh. Okay. And then syempre, yung mga pinagawa mo sa mga bata, pag in-observe mo yung lesson, first lesson, second lesson, marami kang makukuhang data. So, can be quantitative data, can be qualitative data. So sabi ko dito, teachers' experiences in organizing themselves in the development of their lesson study plan. These are also sources of data. Take pictures where teachers are on action. Okay. Append the draft of the lesson study plan. And next, during the lesson implementation, there are rich LS experiences of the teachers and learners. Take pictures where the teachers, students, and materials are interacting. Take pictures of the students' outputs. The accomplished activities, these written works and performance tasks, and the interaction during the lesson implementation are the sources also of data. So the teachers must be able to organize the following data. First, lesson implementation, written work scores individually or per group, performance task scores individually or per group, sample conversations or interactions of students, then the concepts. Ano yung mga concepts nila? Okay, correct ba yung mga concepts nila? Madali ba nilang nasabi yung concept o nahirapan sila na madiscover yung concept? Then second lesson implementation, practically the same thing. Okay. Kung anong scores ang igagather. Then the data analysis now would be the before the lesson study plan implementation, can be quantitative, can be qualitative. So first lesson implementation, you analyze the scores, you can compute the averages, kung applicable, show graphs if applicable. Interaction, show evidence, then concepts, easy versus difficult. Yun lang. Okay? Then sa chapter okay, sa comparisons naman, okay, compare first versus second lesson implementation. Okay? So scores, interaction, and concepts. Sana nakikita niyo yung progress dito sa part next, chapter 3. So, chapter 4 na tayo. Okay? So, this is not chapter 4, discussion of results and reflection. So, section 1, narrate the teacher's experiences in organizing themselves in the development of their lesson study plan. Show pictures of teachers in action. Enumerate challenges in drafting the lesson study plan. Enumerate support systems in the drafting of the lesson study plan. Note, always write in paragraph. Ito yung mga guide na kung paano isulat ang chapter 4. Section 1 yun na. Section 2 na, first lesson implementation. So describe how the teacher delivered the lesson. Show the picture or pictures where there are interactions and conversations. Describe them. So qualitative yan. Okay, qualitative yan. Then show the individual or group scores in tabular or graphical manner. Show pictures of outputs and interpret. Okay? Basta wag lang masyadong maraming pictures. So, yung ano lang, pakita nyo lang kung ano yung pinaka, how do you call that? The picture that can give more information. Kasi may mga ganun eh. May mga picture na kapag pinakita mo, ang dami mong pwedeng sabihin. Diba? Then present the concepts that are easy and difficult among students. Then interpret. So discuss the improvement of the lesson for the second implementation. Section 3 is the second lesson implementation. So you just do the same thing. Okay, sa kung ano yung ginawa sa section 2, ganun yung gagawin sa section 3. Ang pagkakaiba kasi nito is magkaibang klase ito, di ba? Okay, so then section 4, comparison. So pag-compare nyo na dun sa nakita ninyo sa first lesson sa second lesson. In terms of scores, in terms of interactions, and then make a reflection. Pag sinabi naman nating make a reflection is what went well, what did not go well, and therefore what can be done. So ganoon naman yung gawa ng reflection. So what went well, what did not go well, and what needs to be improved. Then section 5, teachers' realizations, discuss how important the observers or the knowledgeable others were. Then discuss their inputs, observations, and how you responded on their inputs or observations. Include pictures of this process. Then chapter 5, tapos na yun, di ba? Okay na yun. So, kasi ang final naman dito, yung the final output. Yung improved lesson after the second lesson implementation. Chapter 5 now is the action plan. So given the same topic and the improved study lesson plan, what are your recommendations for the effective delivery of the first and second lesson implementation? Recommendations. Then maximize student learning through the different types of interaction. So parang gagawa ka lang ng konting action plan. So pag sinabi mong recommendations, put details. Kailan ninyo pwedeng gawin. So ito yung recommendation 1, recommendation 2, recommendation 3. Kailan ito gagawin, aadresan yung recommendation. Ganun lang. Okay? So nakaabot na tayo sa chapter 5. Chapter 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so what's next? Appendices. So what are you going to attach? The initial draft of the lesson study plan, the lesson study plan for the first implementation, the lesson study plan for the second implementation, and the final version of the lesson study plan. Of course, we also call this the research lesson. Diba? Then you have your references. Okay? So, are there questions? Please key in your questions and we'll request the organizing team to gather all their questions. All right, so after having shared this, my personal reflection is that the lesson study is an effective way to teach difficult concepts in science, in math, or in any other learning area. Therefore, when you plan your lesson study, see to it that the topic, the concept, or the learning competency that you are going to feature in your lesson study is the one where you find it most difficult on your part as a teacher. Because by doing so, you will be able to exhaust always all means to be able to make a research lesson or a lesson study plan that will also exhaust your ability to bring out the best in you as a teacher. Because when that happens, the learners will get the most out of it. So good luck in writing your action research using your lesson study experience. So mercy for the love, because you're a teacher, teach, excel, research. So this is Samuel Reyes Oliven, thank you very much for this opportunity of interacting with you. So live and love.